You ever notice how every conversation about where people grew up gets flattened into two options? City kids are anxious and overstimulated. Suburban kids are soft and coddled. Everyone has a take. But there's a third group nobody bothers to describe. The kids who grew up somewhere, with one stoplight, one diner, and a graduating class small enough to fit in a single photo. Small town kids. And here's what nobody wants to say out loud. The way that place wired them might be the most quietly complicated psychology of anyone you work with. They're the colleague who never misses a deadline and never mentions it. The friend who drives 4 hours to a funeral for someone they barely knew. The person who has been in the city for 12 years and still says the name of their hometown like it's an address they're waiting to go back to. Let's start with the thing that shaped them before they could name it. They grew up without anonymity. Not partial anonymity, none. Picture this. You're 11. You're walking the 6 blocks home from school, and in that time 4 adults call out your name, and 2 of them ask about your mother by her first name, and one of them mentions you were seen at the gas station on Saturday. You weren't doing anything. That's the point. You were just seen. And by dinner, the version of your afternoon has already arrived home before you did. Nearly 46 million Americans live in rural counties. That's not a footnote. That's an entire population learning something before puberty that most people never have to learn at all. You are always being watched, and the watching is not hostile, which somehow makes it heavier. That constant observation rewires something. Their brain builds a permanent background process, a second track running underneath every action, asking, how does this look? Psychologists call it hypervigilant self-monitoring. Most people activate it during a job interview. Small-town kids leave it running all day, every day for 18 years. It makes them extraordinarily attuned to a room. They read tension before it surfaces. They know who's upset before anyone speaks. That skill was not a gift. It was a survival adaptation to being permanently visible. But here's where it turns. They watch people leave. There's always one. The one who got the scholarship, the one who moved to the coast with a plan and a duffel bag and a going-away party at the church hall. And then 18 months later, that same person is back working at the hardware store saying it just didn't work out. Nobody mocks them. That's not how it works. They just absorb them back quietly, and the whole town files the story away. The lesson lands without anyone teaching it. Leaving is a bet, and the house usually wins. Wanting more is dangerous. Ambition is fine until it fails in front of everyone who raised you. So they learn to want things silently and to keep the wanting small enough that no one can measure the fall. And it isn't only the ones who come back, it's the ones who don't. There's a name that stops getting mentioned. Someone who made it actually made it and then stopped calling, stopped visiting, stopped coming home for the holidays. And the town has a word for that too, and the word is not proud. The word is forgot where he came from. So the child listening at that table learns the full shape of the trap. Fail out there, and you come home diminished. Succeed out there, and you come home a traitor. There is no version of leaving that the people who love you will fully forgive. Which means the safest thing, the only clean thing, is to never look like you're trying to go anywhere at all. That is why so many of them undersell their own plans. Watch them describe a move, a career change, a decision that took 2 years of courage. They'll shrug it off. They'll call it no big deal. They'll frame the whole thing as something that sort of happened to them, as if they were carried there by circumstance rather than choosing it. Because a plan can be judged. A drift cannot. This is exactly why they refuse to celebrate anything. They get the promotion and tell nobody. They buy the house and mention it 3 months later in passing. It is not modesty and it is not insecurity. It's older than both. It's the memory of what happens to people who look like they think they're better. In a place where everyone knows your family's whole history, rising above is not achievement. It's a betrayal of the people who stayed, so they achieve and then they apologize for it by staying quiet. Then there's the reflex that runs deeper than any of it. They tear themselves down before you get the chance. They tell you the presentation is probably a mess. They say they got lucky. They mention their own flaw before you notice it. Psychologists call this self-handicapping, lowering the expectation so the judgment can never fully land. Where does it come from? Try growing up where your worst moment at 14 is still being mentioned at the diner when you're 30. There is no clean slate. There is no new city where nobody knows. The record is permanent, and it is oral, and it is everywhere. So you build a version of yourself that's already been criticized and handed over before anyone else can. And yet, despite the surveillance, the caution, the swallowed ambition, small-town kids developed a working ethic that is almost impossible to teach. They just do the thing. The fence gets fixed. The sink gets unclogged. The car starts making a noise, and they lie down on the driveway and figure out what the noise is. Nobody was coming, not because the family was neglectful, but because the nearest person who could help was 40 minutes away and charged for the drive. So competence was not a virtue. It was infrastructure, and it started young. Not as a lesson, as a shift. 12 years old and stacking hay in August because the neighbor needed hands and hands were what you had. 14 and running a register at the only grocery store in the county, learning to count change back to a woman who taught your third grade class. 16 and mowing lawns in a truck that was older than you, and the money wasn't spending money, it was the insurance payment. These weren't experiences. Nobody wrote them down anywhere. They were just what the week required, and they never talk about it. There is no post. There is no story about their grit. The work gets done, and then it's Tuesday again. Ask them about the hardest year of their life, and they'll say it was fine. Ask them what they're good at, and they will genuinely struggle to answer, not because they can't think of anything, but because naming it feels like bragging, and bragging is the one sin the town never quite forgave. Here's the paradox at the center of them. They are simultaneously the most self-reliant people you'll meet and the most stubbornly loyal. They will not ask you for a ride. They will change a tire in the rain rather than make a phone call. But if your father dies, they will be in the car within the hour, and they will bring food, and they will not say anything meaningful, and they will stay until the dishes are done. Loyalty was never optional where they grew up. When the population is 4,000 showing up isn't kindness. It's arithmetic. Everyone has to because there is no one else. Their relationship with authority follows the same logic. They don't care about your title. They care how long you've been doing it. A man who has run the same shop for 30 years has authority. A 28-year-old with an impressive job title and a strategy deck has nothing yet. They will be polite. They will nod. They will quietly do it the correct way anyway. They learned this by watching the outsiders arrive. The consultant who was going to revitalize downtown. The chain that promised jobs and closed in 2 years. The politician who came once, took the photo, and never returned. Credentials talked. Nothing changed. So they learned to trust duration, not declaration. And this follows them into every office they ever walk into. They will sit through the all hands. They will listen to the vision. They will watch the executive use a word like transformation 4 times in 9 minutes. And something behind their eyes goes very quiet because they have seen this exact performance before in a school gymnasium from a man in a good suit who was gone by spring. They're not being difficult. They're not disengaged. They are simply waiting to see whether you're still here in 2 years. If you are, you'll have their loyalty completely and it will be the most durable thing in the building. If you're not, they'll have already known and they'll never once mention that they knew. And then there's the cost. The thing they'll never bring up. Research consistently shows that adults from rural backgrounds seek mental health support at markedly lower rates than their urban peers. And it isn't only about distance or cost, it's that asking requires being seen needing something, and being seen needing something is the exact thing they spent their childhood learning to avoid, so they carry it quietly, efficiently. There's a term for what this becomes: learned constraint. It's what happens when the ceiling gets internalized so early that you stop noticing it's there. You don't apply for the bigger role, not because you were told no, because nobody around you ever applied. And so the shape of the possible narrowed while you weren't looking, and now you call it being realistic. That is the quiet tragedy of it. They were never held back, they just stopped reaching so early that it feels like a personality trait. And here's what I keep coming back to. Everyone talks about small towns like they're something to escape, a place you get out of, a thing you overcome. But look at what actually got made there. Someone who can read a room in 4 seconds, someone who fixes the thing instead of complaining about the thing, someone who shows up when it's inconvenient and stays after everyone else has gone home. They're not a bridge to somewhere else. They're roots. And roots don't get admired. Nobody photographs them. They work in the dark, unseen, holding an entire structure upright, and the tree gets all the credit. That's fine. Roots were never in it for the credit. They were in it because something had to hold. If this landed somewhere, if you're the one who left, and still can't fully explain why you flinch when someone praises you, or if you finally understand why your quietest coworker is the one who never lets anything fall subscribe, it genuinely means something that you're here